Okay, but no, it's a bit depressing what you talked about the last bit about the way racecourse bookmaking's gone. But I remember as a young floor man that places like Worcester, the fourth favourite in a row would have gone in. You're wandering around in your shorts, perma-tan, get it ready, bookies, drawing off everybody. Yeah. Now, it used to be a lot of fun, didn't it?
It was good fun. I remember there was a fella, Heathorns, you remember the firm Heathorns, Michael Simmons, I liked him. He could be very abrupt with people. I remember one day, it was Champions Day. I'd I'd set out to be with the first favourite, ping. All of a sudden about 4 favourites on the spin, I'm winning 2 or 3 grand, everybody's running around for readies. He sent his man up, I think I dug him about 5 grand up, and Jimmy always got caked up, give him about 10 grand. So from that day, I could do what I wanted with him. And he used to love, if I was winning, if I got a few quid, got the day's wages, we used to stay in, Newmarket was a good gaff for me, a real good gaff. Take packets, 6 and 8 grand's a race, cash without the firms playing. And I'd thank the bookies if I'd had a good winning. Thanks all for your help and good luck. And he used to love it, Michael Simmons. He'd stand there, he'd say to his 2 workmen, we'll have a bit of fun here, It was good. It was a laugh and the jokes. The more dour bookies, Colin Webster, he was a good booker. He was a good player, but he wouldn't be the most happy, win, lose or draw. And you could see him sulking when I'd won, be charging off, And I remember when I started, I had the same cigar for about 3 months. I'd get a cheap box of cigars from somebody, Havanas, cheaper than what they should be, put it that way. Every race, I'd get up on the stool. Even when I'd done my money, it was tough. I have about 2 puffs. Put it under the stool we used to stand on, come back every race, they think he's got some, this guy's are always smoking cigars. It's part of the act, People either loved me or loathed me, that was my personality.
So when you went racing, had you spent hours on the form, or did you go there and each race depended on who backed?
No, I'll tell you what happened. Jimmy was very pally with Sean Graham, the Irish firm. The father, he died 20, 30 years ago. He recommended the buying and selling of pitches, everything, boards and rails, all that sort of stuff, 30 years before his time. Hot firm. Every day I went racing, Jimmy would be with me 9 out of 10 meetings, I'd ring them for the card. Lots of things in racing, people think you've got to have punters having 2 or 3 grand that were hot cookies. Plenty of people only had tenors on, where every bit is hot cookie. So things like that, so I'd always ring them up for a card. I'll tell you a story about them later on when we finish in with Paul Doherty, my pal. He had $1 share in the pound. This is a good story. We'll finish up from that. So I always had a card with them. But my main thing in racing was to find out what was going to be backed. Obviously, if Ladbrokes was backing a horse, I could be off. It didn't make me a genius. I'd go round the ring. Might take me 20 bets to get 2 grand on. But if I've had a 3,000 or 2 and I'm standing on my joint and laying even 5 grand within a minute, it's fantastic business. That was the big thing. People thought Ladbrokes put me in. I just saw what the reps was doing. He was the same as me. And I'd be going round where you could get your 100 quids on. All I wanted was the horses shortened. It was a fantastic game. The modern bookie now, he might fluke 100 quid. There's not many 100 quid punters now at the races. He'll lay even 100 quid. He'll have a 105 to 100 back on the machine. He's got his chest puffed out like a peacock. The old days it was proper.
Do you still go racing?
Very rarely, Simon. I went twice last year. And when I go, might be odds on chance I last past 3 or 4 races is the limit. I used to go to Cheltenham, the big meeting in Patsy Burns' box. He was pally with Barney, a big building company. He built the Emirates, Wimbledon, good fella. Ordinary, the Irish are fantastic people. All the English has tried to do is knock the life out of them, all through history. His box was fantastic. There'd be all the Kerrygold butter man, and I remember all the Irish wanted to do was back a winner. I'd go in the box. I'd been away for the winter, come back looking bronzed and ready to have and all the Irish would say, "What you fancy?" Tony McCoy's wife, the father was in there one day, a nice fella. "What do you fancy?" "What do I fancy? I've been away for 10 weeks. That was the Irish, but he was a fantastic fella. So I did, plus he wasn't pushed and shoved. I love Cheltenham, probably my favourite racecourse. And it was a matter how much you got there. I remember I used to always come back after being away for the worst 10 weeks of the year for bookies. The first race, Alan King go and bet one side of me, and Henwood the other side. Take about eight or 9 grand on the race. Middle Pegger won about a 6 or 7 to 1 chance. Cop about 6 grand. So I was charging up and down the rails. What a game this is. How I've been away for 10 weeks leaving this to you. And all of a sudden, John Banks had got his arm round my shoulder. They'd just opened that bottom ring with the hospitality village. I said, where can I go and buy a crate of Louis Roder for my Angie? He put his arm round me, he says, make it Chardonnay. There's 31 races to go. You know, but it was honestly, it was a good game. People went to, Cheltenham was the start. Within 3 weeks it was Liverpool, then the flat. You know, all the classics. I bet all the big meetings. I said before, I did about 110 days a year. 80 out the 110, you know, be on you. You know, the others, the Wolverhamptons and Nottinghams and Leicester, I only go 2 or 3 times a year. That was a little fiddle.
Now, but people are watching this thinking, I hate you. Telling all the stories, you know, you're winning fortunes off the punches. There must have been an absolute disaster that you can tell us about.
Oh, you have disasters all the way through. You have runs. I used to bet at Pontefract, particularly the Friday night meetings were good. I was in the middle of a bad run, and Pontefract, where I bet on the rails, was only about 10 yards short of the winning line, and the horses used to come out of a little gate by the winning line. Anyhow, I'd stood somewhere for about 3 or 4 grand this day, in the middle of a bad run. Anyhow, when he comes past me, there's only 4 strides to the pole. There's someone's about 3 or 4 in front of the favourite. Impossible for it to win. What happens? He tips the jockey off veering towards the gate, leaves the bogey in front. Things can happen in racing that can't happen. Frankie Dettori Day was one. I had plenty of good idings, but more good winnings. You should get money. Any bookie should get money between March and August. Times in between, uphill.
Was there ever a time when you're having a bad run and you're starting to look in the bottom of the odd, thinking, blimey, I don't know how many more of these races I can cope with?
I'll tell you a true story. I hadn't long been on the rails, year or two. I hadn't got much money behind me, and I got to Ascot, which was a 5-day meeting. Most of my business was accounts. I'd seen a horse called Forest Flower win at, I think Stevie Cawthon rode it first time up, bolted up somewhere. Then runs at Warwick in about a 4-horse race. Frankie Dettori rode it, got it boxed in, and got it out and still won about 3 or 4 lengths, all within 2 or 3 strides. Anyhow, I got to Ascot the first day. 3 or 4 results, bosh, the last 2 favourites win. Technically, I was over broke. I'd gone. What am I going to do? You know, gone. Anyhow, the first race the next day was Forest Flower. I had a 4,002 in it. When bar it in the book, it won. And I had ups and downs from them, but was never, you know, bosh. If I'd have called on my accounts at the time, I'd gone.
Now, whenever you got a few quid, as you mentioned earlier, you was quite often down the airport and on a plane.
I'd always be off. I was always off, as I said to you before, I was only thinking the other day, why I never went. Now when I travel, I'm off soon, August the 29th, and I come back March the 13th. The Saturday as Cheltenham starts 2 days later. Why in those days, I never used to go till after Christmas. There was always a big meeting at Chepstow. You remember that day? I would very likely fly the same night. It was a good meeting. That was 2 or 3 grand given you. But I used to have at least 1 week, only 1 week. 1 week every month I'd be off to Spain. Sit on a beach, get your head together and relax. No matter how much bottle, how much money you got, you keep standing horses for 3 and 4 grand. They're running at you. When you're younger, you're braver. Don't care. As you get older, it's more to you. But I'll always be away. I always had 4 months out to 12 travelling. Not because I was a playboy, you know. I needed it because of the business I was in. I laid everything I laid. I never bet each way. Never bet each way because I was laying live horses. 1 or 2 punters. I had punters, you know. They could be on each way, but nobody else, you know, because I was laying live horses. But it was good, you know. Fantastic life. I'm 70. I'm telling the truth. When my birthday first went in the Racing Post, I knocked 7 years off. I think Gary Wiltshire coppered me up. It actually goes in 1 year less now. I'm telling the truth. I am 76 years of age. I look well done off for my age. I should do if I have 6 months in foreign sun and then 6 months sitting down Edgbaston watching Warwickshire County Cricket Club. But that's it. You know, I'm going away. I know there's a COVID. I've had a fantastic life. If things happen, the thing, tough. I couldn't be here for the winter. I'd get through the winter, obviously, but I'd be very unhappy.
So have you retired as such now?
Oh yeah, I retired. I haven't. 20 years ago, once the pitches could be sold, I got out. Funny enough, I'd get more money for pitches now. Good pitches. I only got 20 grand for my Youth Oxford pitch, number 2. I'd have got close to 6 figures at one time. But then other pitches that I got money for, you probably get less. I don't understand the money they're going for. I really don't. I suppose the only answer to that is you put your money in your bank. Well, if I'd have said to you 10 years ago, Simon, whatever few quid you got in the bank, get it out, they're going to go skint. I knew he was balmy, Mickey Fletcher. But you can get 0.5% on your money now. You can gamble if you want to go on the stock exchange. You know, racing was a good game. It was a matter how much you got in the summer. And I wasn't there for the winter.
Is there anywhere that you've been on your travels that you ever fancied making a booking? You ever been anywhere thinking this looks alright?
First time I went to Sydney's my favourite city in the world. I went twice to Australia. Funny enough, I'd had a 25,003. I love the American football. I'd had a 25,003 San Francisco when they beat Cincinnati in the final. It must be 30, 35, 40 years ago. Joe Montana was the quarterback. He got the final touchdown. I watched it in Canberra about 7 o'clock in the morning the next day. So they won. So that was good for the trip. You know, I really like Sydney as a city. I went to the races. It reminds me, funny enough, I'd been away about 2 weeks because with the jet lag and stuff. I go to the races and they'd all got these, similar to the electric boards, but the twist boards. They were all in one line. No life. All by the cars, by the cafe, bookies everywhere. A guy come along with a list, 1 at 8, 2 at 7 or 5, 3 at 16, 4 at 24, all funny numbers. They all put the same prices up and stood there. Fast forward to England, you know, since Betfair's been out. I wouldn't particularly, it was big gamblers, the Australians. A lot of Greeks there, Chinese there, gamblers. I mean, they've never taken to the racetrack, have they, the Chinese? They love the betting shops. Quick for them, they can play every 10 minutes. No, England was fantastic when I was betting. Honestly, it was a fantastic game. Nowhere I fancied. I've been all over. I went racing in India, everywhere. You know, everywhere. Even Vietnam, I went to a racetrack. Millions there, millions.
Right, so to finish up, you've been very streetwise in your career. You got to know people quickly. You had to think on your feet.
Yeah.
Now, this for a young person that's got into bookmaking now, and obviously they've had tough times, and if they go through bad runs or whatever, what would you say to a young person that's hit a tricky patch to get them to stay the trip? What would be your advice if you've hit a rough patch?
Sell up and find another game. I think there's very little future in racecourse bookmaking. I really do. You know. It's sad because I'm pro bookie. I think it's sad. I can see the big meetings still getting plenty of bookies, but I think as an industry, I don't think it's particularly well run. You know, they haven't got any. I was streetwise. I'll give you an example. 30 years ago, if it was every 30 years we get bad winters. Now, if I hadn't got a keep anywhere to sleep, I'd knock on the Salvation Army's door or something. Most bookies, because they were born into it, they'd be frozen dead in the street. They wouldn't have, you know, you have to be streetwise in anything. I'm a big believer. I think there's very little future. I mean, they're about a third of the way through the 40-year tenure. So what's going to happen there, I don't know.
Well, on that rather sombre note, Mickey Fletcher, thank you very much.
Thank you.